about 3 or 4 in the actual Zoom, and then on the other channels, 30 to 40, and over the next week or so, a few hundred will watch the recordings. So not many. We're kind of a small deal, which is fine and suits us just fine. But for everyone out there, welcome to the Security Coffee House again. This time we are talking with the speakers from BeerCon2, who are all first-time speakers, except for one who was technically a first-time speaker when they applied, so we'll ignore that one. And we've got 4 of them with us tonight. Coffeehouse is an informal event. It's a relaxed conversation about topics of interest, which are mainly an excuse for me to talk to people I think will be interesting to talk to. And so tonight we have Nicholas, we have Lynette, we have Ayush, we have Elsbetia. Yeah, I got that
Close
right.
enough.
Good. Close enough. Who all did their first public talks just a little while ago at BeerCon2. So if we can just get a quick introduction, maybe 5-6 sentences from each of you, and if we start with Nicholas.
Yeah. So hi everyone. I'm Nicholas. I'm a student in Geneva. I am a developer working mostly in CLI, GUI, mobile, and IoT development. Big spread. I've gotten more involved in InfoSec in the last few months, basically since COVID. And I've also taken a particular interest to OSINT in my off time, participating in the Global Search CTF by Trace Labs. When was it? A few weeks ago. So yeah.
And so next, Lynette.
I'm Leonard. I'm from the Netherlands. I do quite a bit of responsible disclosure with the Dutch Institute of Vulnerability Disclosure, a volunteer organization that tries to keep the internet safe. And in my off time, I participate in things like CTF, Hack the Box, and just a lot of ethical hacking, really, penetration testing, and some development, but I would not really call myself a developer.
And Elżbieta?
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah, there we go.
Hi, I'm Elżbieta, but everyone calls me Elizabeth because it's just easier. I am based in Edinburgh, Scotland, and I am a graduate apprentice security analyst, currently doing my second year of cybersecurity at Edinburgh Napier University. I am a complete rookie when it comes to cybersecurity. I started my transition to cybersecurity a year and a half ago, so everything is new for me and everything is absolutely interesting for me. So there you go.
And finally, Ayush.
Hey guys, I'm from India. I graduated recently, like 6 months back, and I've always had this interest in security. So yeah, I mean, like that was one of the goals that I want to end up in this industry. As for work, I work as like a security engineer, working towards like do team stuff, and I also in my part time work with Winja CTF, like organizing CTS and other things.
Brilliant, thank you all. So the obvious first question is, you've just all fairly recently done your first public talk. So we're going to ignore that completely, and instead I'd like to ask each of you, and we'll go backwards this time, why security? What got you interested in security in the first place? And if you want to put your Twitter handles in the chat so that the people in the chat can see them, please do. But let's start with Ayush. Why security? What was interesting about it?
So I think it was back in 8th standard or something that we had like computers in our syllabus. Like the first time I was introduced to computers as part of my curriculum. And at that point, it was interesting to me, like fiddling around with computers and like messing about stuff, making it do things that it was not exactly supposed to do. And I guess it's a hacker cliche now, but like the kick of making things misbehave, I would say. Yeah, so that's where it started, and then I read a lot about it. Didn't really work towards a lot, I mean, towards security in school, but when I went to college, and that's where I found a whole bunch of seniors. I talked to people who were already in the industry, I did a few internships, learned from them, and the interest just grew. I mean, I also tried out a bunch of other things like dev and other things, but I didn't really, didn't find it really my vibe there. So I like figured out the security is what I wanted to do in the end. So yeah, that's how I ended up here.
Thank you. And Elżbieta?
My background before I started cybersecurity was administration. I was working in the public sector, and some of my responsibilities was making sure our offices were GDPR compliant and looking after budget reconciliations and cash audits and stuff like that. And at that time, which I mentioned during the BeerCon, the public sector was going through reviews. So my job was a fixed term contract. And I was looking to change my career to something that would be more stable. And IT seems like a very stable career path. And cybersecurity seemed like a field that was most related to what I was doing as an admin. So I could transfer some of those soft skills, attention to detail and auditing and stuff like that to a cybersecurity post.
Yep, I have to agree. IT is definitely stable. The people in it maybe less so, but IT is stable. Lennart?
I started out with just a general interest in computer and started studying computer science. And in the later years of the education, university offered several more specialization courses, which is how I rolled into the adjacent fields of digital forensics, which then started. That's how mostly growing, and incident response was very new, malware analysis. So just digital forensics, with mainly focusing on law enforcement type of work, turned sort of into digital forensics and incident response, well, which has also a huge attraction in the private sector, of course. And it's very adjacent to general cybersecurity, and that's how I sort of rolled into the field.
And finally, Nicholas.
So it's a bit of a longer story because there's a lot more hurdles, but just by shortening it down, so I'm currently doing a bachelor's in information systems and service sciences, which has a certain component of security in it, albeit theoretical and academic. Before doing this bachelor, I attempted a bachelor in computer science in the Lausanne Polytechnical School in Switzerland, in which I failed miserably, but it kind of got me on the jump for cybersecurity. But with studies, I never got the time to really get onto it. And at the beginning of COVID, what happened was that I suddenly had more time because no public transport, no stuff like that. And I also had less contact with my friends. So I made friends on the internet by joining a Discord Hack the Box CTF stuff, server with Lennart. And we kind of hit it off. And at some point, after a multitude of alcoholic drinks, I kind of convinced myself and he convinced me to join the happy hour, and then it kind of transited into BeerCon because I'd never spoken before. So that's kind of how I got here. Abbreviated.
And we've got some definite appreciation for the shout out to InfoSec Happy Hour in the audience. Right, so the next big thing, and this will be for each of you, why the public speaking? How did you end up doing it? Whether that was because you were kicked into it, because you really wanted to do it and only just got the opportunity. What was your reason for doing it? And we will go in a different order this time. So let's start, Elżbieta.
So I've heard about the beer farmers from my manager, David, who is very active in the chat at the moment. And he thought that my story might be interesting. And in a way, I was the rookiest of all the rookies speaking. I at least feel that way. And I think public speaking, why public speaking? I think it's a bit intimidating coming in from a non-IT background into cybersecurity and choosing a topic to which no one could challenge me, because assuming no one from the speakers would know me better than I do myself, was why I was convinced to do it. I think that if I would be talking about a technical subject, I would be more shy and I would be more hesitating about it. But I want to challenge myself to do new things. I think that moving to cybersecurity was a huge challenge, but sort of going out there and talking in public about what I'm doing was another challenge that I want to conquer and, tick the box to say, yeah, I did it, and gain more confidence as well when it comes to talking about other people about cybersecurity. So this is my tiny step into maybe talking in further conferences in the future about more technical stuff.
The point has been made that you didn't just do the public speaking, you smashed it. And I think that goes for absolutely everyone who spoke. So I do highly recommend checking out the BeerCon2 talks. They are all on YouTube. I'm usually not this enthusiastic about the panelists. Normally there's some, okay, well, you're just in security, but actually you guys did knock it out of the park. But moving on, same question for Lennart, please.
Scott made me do it. No. It's not entirely true, but he did definitely encourage me. I wasn't too sure if I wanted to speak. I was like quite new to a lot of things. What do I have to tell that's interesting? And Scott knows me fairly well. He was like, well, you could talk about this or this. And I eventually sort of picked ethics because I felt it was something that was quite underlighted in our industry. So, and I had known a bit about it, doing a lot of responsible disclosure and having to have made quite a few decisions in that way. So I decided to throw a CFP together and submit. And that's how I ended up speaking.
Thank you. And I was going to ask each of you for another round of questions why you chose your topic, but obviously two of you have answered that. So let's go to Nicholas next with how did you get here and why did you choose your topic? Do both of them.
Well, once again, happy hour. The beer farmers being very active there, producing a CFP, and then multiple people just prodding me in the right direction. And well, I'm not going to say unique because it's not true. I have a certain perspective on information security, a certain set of skills that does translate laterally pretty well. And I wanted to really put the focus on the things I'd learned by making mistakes. And so most of the things I talked about in my talk in certain points were either me making mistakes or me hearing mistakes being made among my colleagues, my co-students, everyone. And so that kind of motivated me, at least some segments of my talk. And the other one was just, I have a certain breadth of research the pool that I can tap into, which is wider than the standard cybersecurity pool of knowledge, because it's okay. You have all of these platforms, all of these languages, and they still need to mesh together in some kind of harmonious way. That you can do everything with one language, and so it's something that affects everyone from a developer perspective. And so that's the perspective I wanted to bring.
Thank you. And Ayush, to finish out that round of questions.
Yeah, so for me, it was partly because I wanted to share what I was learning. Like I just started off working in security, and I'm exposed to a lot of new things day in, day out. So that's what I wanted to share, and partly because I wanted to get the feedback on, where do I stand exactly? And obviously as a challenge to public speaking as well, because I don't really do public speaking. So partly that, and yeah, meeting new people in the industry along the way for that.
Thank you. And just out of curiosity, why did you choose the topic?
That was something that I actually was reading about a bit, and then I tried out a bunch of tools measure different metrics and stuff. And along the way, I found a bunch of services that were there, tried them out, and I created this whole concept that I thought I could present in a talk. And it was just a random incident that I saw that tweet from, I think, someone in the beer farmers group, and I just took it from there. It was pure accident that I saw that tweet, and I was able to like submit my CFP.
Thank you. Right. So we've now covered the distant past. Let's do the recent past. A question for each of you again, and we'll go in a different order just to mix it up. How was the actual experience of preparing, of doing the talk? We got a question from the audience that I want to bring in. Was there any issue of nerves, imposter syndrome, anything like that? And how did you handle them if they came up? Or did you not and just plow through anyway? That's also an answer. But how was the actual experience of it? What challenges did you have to overcome? I'll give you each a bit longer for this one because it's a bit of an in-depth question. And if we start with Lennart.
I think my experience in the very days leading up to my talk was a bit different from the others because I was also helping out as a roadie behind the scenes, and I just spent most of my time helping others instead of doing work on my sheets, etc. But the longer time leading up to it, wasn't too nervous. I've never done real public speaking, but obviously in university you have to give presentations as well and such, so I was not too nervous or worried about it at first. And just made my slides. And imposter syndrome, a little bit. You always think like, someone else can do it better, but the fact that this was a rookie conference and such, and that the audience would not expect someone with 20 years experience, both public speaking and in their fields and such, really helped in that regard. Made me a lot less nervous, a lot less worried, and feel a lot more confident in not being an imposter there. So that really helped. And of course, the mentoring sessions and the community feeling, building up with all the other speakers, making new friends that were really in the same situation helped a lot as well for me. And then on the days itself, like the few days leading up to my talks, just keep busy and not think about it and plow through. That was it for me, I think, really.
Thank you. And Nicholas, if we go to you next.
So imposter syndrome, yes. I'm actually having imposter syndrome sitting here right now. I had imposter syndrome earlier today at B-Sides Islamabad. I had imposter syndrome at BeerCon2. Just my entire life, even being on happy hour is imposter syndrome. It's getting better at certain stages, but there's a lot of imposter syndrome going on. And how I got over that was slightly over preparing and slightly adding a certain amount of content. So it was a very dense talk, is a certain quantifier that one can use for what I did. And just preparing it, I think I went through like, 6 mentors? I showed 6 times. I also showed it twice between, so we did our own rooms, we were training each other and, doing a few things like that. I also went a few times on that one, and just, I think I over-prepared slightly, and it helped me steal my nerves. But the day of, I was still nerve-wracked. It got better as I got into familiar waters, let's put it.
Yeah, I will be honest, some of us were quite impressed that with the number of slides you had, that you stayed to time as well as you did. Over preparation, definitely, but that's not a bad thing. Ayush?
Because I was already working with what I was going to present, I had the content ready, so I was not really worried about the slides and such. I did struggle a lot about what to put into those slides and what not to put in there. And even with the timing. So when I tried practicing on my own, it was really weird because I would at times finish off in like 10 minutes, and then I would like go over 30 at times. So I was like struggling to find the middle ground, but eventually I kind of figured out, maybe practiced my way into figuring out what was worth saying and what was not. And yeah, I mean, wasn't really stressed out before the day of the presentation, but during the day I was like, the butterflies in my stomach thing. I was like, the entire day was like that. But the moment that I was handed over the session that, okay, it's now my screen and I have to share and stuff. I just plowed through it, I guess, and then it was just like, after that it was just over. Like you just wake up and you realize, okay, I'm somewhere. So it was sort of like that experience that, yeah, it's done now. So, yeah.
And finally, Elżbieta?
Oh yeah, imposter syndrome, especially looking at the topics for other presentations. I thought, would anyone want to hear about moving from admin to cybersecurity? Is that really something that people will be interested, especially if there's so many people that are already in cybersecurity? But whenever I did the dry run, I didn't even have my presentation prepared halfway through. I just thought I'll go through what I've got and I'll talk about what I want to say and see if I can get some feedback. And I did get feedback to also do an angle for why would an employer want to get an apprentice, which I think was a good thing to talk about, because not a lot of companies are aware of the program. Or of the benefits of getting an apprentice. I think there's a huge risk of I'm getting someone who's not trained, who's not familiar with the subject. It'll cost me time to train them up to be qualified. So I think that discussing the benefits of that was good for future apprentices to have a wider selection of employers wanting to take on board apprentices. The community has been extremely welcoming from my perspective. And I think because I didn't take any days off from work and like I have kids that you probably hear in the background, a dog, 2 cats. It's been so busy that I haven't really thought much about what could go wrong, or I haven't over prepared myself. And actually on the day of the presentation, I was picking up my kids, and straight after I picked up the kids, I came home and turned on the Zoom to do my presentation. So there was absolutely no time for me to overthink or to make any last minute changes. And I just went for it. And I think it turned out okay.
It did. It turned out great. And I know there is at least one person in the audience at the moment who would particularly enjoy your talk, the journey from admin to moving into security. And
I think it was the joke at the end that won over the crowd.
But they should definitely look it up. We have another question, which is a bit about broadening out. So now that you've got your taste of public speaking, BeerCon2 was obviously a very industry focused event, and it was a certain niche of the industry, which was the friendly niche in a way. But SciComm, science communication, is a big thing. There's a whole industry behind it. Is there something for either cybersecurity com or SecCom, or I had to be very clear there, SecCom, that type of communication? And if not, should it be? I mean, you've obviously just entered this. Do you think this is a field where there is a wider public need for this sort of communication? And let's pick a completely different order this time. So since you just finished speaking, I'm going to go with Elizabeth because I've not got it written in front of me. Elizabeth, do you want to kick off on that one?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I'm new to everything. For me, any sort of a panel like that is interesting. And I think that for a graduate apprentice or anyone who's like taking their first steps in cybersecurity, this is an amazing opportunity to sort of get to know a new subject or a new angle on a topic, or even just to network, to be honest. Because let's face it, networking in cybersecurity is crucial. The traverse of information. I mean, whenever there's an issue with Microsoft Cloud or anything else, the quickness in which you can get the information to make a critical patch is important. And having that network of people pushing information from one person to another is important. So I think from my perspective, it's also important to get that networking started and meet more people and get to know them. So I think there should be more panels like that to join people from different backgrounds.
Ayush?
Yeah, I'd agree with her as well. I mean, to network and to like share what you've learned, what you've known is kind of for me at least personally the point of like any conference for that matter. And like I mean, you might or might not get like presenter talk, but to learn from a lot of different people in like in a 3 day period or like for whatever period that conference is going on, it's like an amazing experience, and you get such a varied a number of people from all sorts of different places with their own opinions and views, which in a way, I mean, like obviously help you form your own as well, especially for, I mean, at least me starting out in this industry and like getting all these views on things that I think I knew. But when I hear someone else explain some concept that I thought that I knew, and then it suddenly changes in a way, that's like a funny feeling, but like in a funny feeling in a good way. So yeah, I mean, networking and sharing and learning, I guess.
Thank you. Nicholas.
Could you please repeat the question?
Possibly. Where were we? Right. So BeerCon was very industry focused. That's not a bad thing, but it was. Do any of you now have a particular appetite to do wider public speaking? There's a whole thing about science communication, which is a massive industry in its own right, and there's a push to get SciComm or science communication out to the public. Is cybersecurity communication something that should be receiving that? And if it is, are you going to start going down that route? What do you want to do with it or not, as the case may be?
Yeah. So to be fair, I started out with SciComm. I actually have a certain certificate in scientific vulgarization, which is the art of, making information accessible to people. I do workshops. So one of my jobs at university, which I do to also pay for my university, partly, is that I do workshops for like middle school and high school kids, teaching them about computer science, or giving them a small approach to computer science. And while that not be cybersecurity centric, it is something that in that aspect, very simple aspect, is quite easily translatable. And you can just talk about awareness first, but you can also extend into cybersecurity. We have a cryptography workshop, which is, I wouldn't say advanced, I would say dense, but it's still pretty accessible, and the people, at least if they haven't learned how to do, I don't know, visionary ciphers off the back of their hand, they know what certain cryptography things are used for and where it's used and why it's important to them. And broadening this whole public speaking in cybersecurity and making it more accessible is important, because, okay, you might have some niche topics like IoT mobile development. Let's admit it is pretty niche, but things like, I don't know, hardening web applications or whatever, it's something that's that strikes closer to home and might be something that people actually work in by using tools like WordPress and stuff that they never actually thought about, raising up issues. And even if they don't know exactly how to solve these issues, they know how to, they know that it exists at the very least, and they know that there's a certain number of keywords they can look for to access the information. And that's an important step to take in bridging the gap between the people that aren't necessarily aware of it and the people that are on their high horse of it, quote unquote.
And Lennart, if you want to finish off that question.
I agree with what everyone else said. I think, well, all the other...
I'm actually just going to interrupt here and say that on a recent panel I was on, I was told that the phrase "I agree with everyone else" was banned. You
Fair
don't
enough.
have to agree with them. You're allowed to say "I support them" or something else, but it's not agree.
Oh, but I agree with the points they made. I think that cybersecurity is a very big field, and like everyone needs a bit of it. Almost everyone uses some kind of computer systems, even if they're not in the cybersecurity industry. So I think widening our audience is definitely a good thing. I do think for when it comes to public speaking, BeerCon2 was very industry focused, and I think that the topics you would consider speaking on might be slightly different for something like BeerCon or a B-size conference than for a wider science community. It would be a lot more about awareness. I would be my personal idea to speak about than about the technical details. But I also think in return that we as a security community can really learn from science, because we're not very scientific often. Like, a lot of people currently working in the computer industry and in the more senior roles have not per se had an education in computer science, because it was not really a thing when they went through their education. So, for instance, if I look at vulnerability disclosure or vulnerability research, there are very few scientific methods or standards decided upon on how to do the research. How do you mass scan repeatable, reliable in like a scientific process? It's not really defined. There's been very little published about, so I think more exposure of our own community to the scientific community at large would also be a very good thing.
That's actually a perfectly placed answer, because the next question goes into a bit about academia, where there might be some lessons from academia we do or don't want to learn. But one thing is, in academia, speaking at a conference is seen as an important step in advancing your career. In industry, speaking is kind of irrelevant. You can do it to heighten your profile. I do it at every opportunity because I've got a huge ego and it needs feeding. But it's very much optional for most people in industry. It's not optional in academia. So there's a question that's been posed to each speaker with a follow-up to come. To what extent did you speak at BeerCon2 because you wanted to, for fun, or as a personal challenge for your own self-fulfillment? And how much did you think of it as a career advancing step? I realise that's quite a sensitive personal question, but let's kick off that one with Ayush.
I'd say 3/4 because I wanted to do it on an individual level, and then a quarter for like a career advancement, because I get to meet new people and like learn from them and stuff. So yeah, bit of both, but sure. Mostly because I wanted to do it.
Okay, and Elzbieta? Sorry.
It's difficult to give proportions. I would say half and half, or yeah, let's say half and half. It's a great way to sort of gain a new skill and become more confident, especially if you're new. But also it's a great way to put yourself out there and make an impression. And I think that like the topic of recruitment in IT, sorry, that's my dog, is a subject for like a maybe separate conversation. But I think that just looking at a person's CV and looking at the certificates, or like checking boxes to say, yeah, he did this, he did that, is a really bad way of recruiting a person, because there's like so much to a personality that a person can bring to a team. And I feel that if you work in a very busy environment that cybersecurity is, working with a person who's like really laid back or has a good sense of humor, and even if the day is crappy, they can turn the situation around and make a stupid joke or whatever, is really important. So I think that looking at people at conferences and looking at their characters as well is a good way to find someone who would fit into the team. So yeah, I think it's like 50-50.
So just to give you fair warning, I've now got your name down next to topic of recruitment for a future panel. So be ready for that. Lynette.
I already knew the beer farmers from Happy Hour, as well as you and some of the other mentors. So I was already part of the community. So for me, it was a very large reason to speak, was just being part of the event and of the community organizing it, and knowing I would have fun and enjoy it and be part of something awesome with people that I liked. So that was for me a very big reason to speak. But of course, you do know that it will give opportunities, lending relations. You have a cool recording of your talk to show, to put on your blog or CV. And so yeah, definitely. Also, I wouldn't say I did it for advancing anything, but I was definitely aware that it was a good positive thing to do.
Nicholas, you're finishing off this round.
Yeah, so I'm in this tricky, prickly situation of already being in academia, which is always fun. But my entire involvement at BeerCon was more from my secondary side gig, quote unquote, my side personality, my non-academic personality, quote unquote. And so for myself, I'd actually submitted 2 CFPs, one to BeerCon and one to B-Sides, Islamabad, and both got accepted. So what I did is I took BeerCon2 as a personal challenge. I wanted to make something good. I wanted to make something interesting. I wanted to challenge myself. That was at the beginning. And then when I got into this whole, so of course, knew the beer farmers, knew happy hour, knew the whole community aspect, knew the whole friendship, etc., etc. But BeerCon2 also attracted other people. I didn't know exactly how they would mesh together with me and whatever. So at the beginning was a personal challenge, and then it was a common challenge. Find a way to uplift everyone, which is something that I quite enjoyed. And okay, besides Islamabad, I tried to bring the same energy, and I think I did. Be somewhere in some platform will be able to confirm, or not. But there is this level of, and I'm not going to diss on the fellow speakers that I had today, but the energy they brought was different. There was BeerCon, it was a fun moment. It was everyone knew each other, had talked together, had interacted. It brought something, an extra spice to the conference. And that I find really made it something. And the whole academia part, it being important for academia, being at a cornerstone in your career or whatever. I mean, sure, it exists. It's not something that I consider entirely prevalent, at least in our corner of the community. If it's cybersecurity for finance, sure. Cybersecurity between people, normal people like you and I, it's another pair of gloves.
And the follow-up question is potentially an interesting one, because obviously your first public speaking event was a virtual conference. So you've not really got the comparison here, but just going on your thoughts and feelings about it, do you think it helped presenting at a virtual conference where you're talking to a screen as opposed to a room full of people, or do you think that actually hindered your talk? And let's go with Lennart first on that one.
I think it definitely helped. If it wasn't for virtual conferences, like BeerCon wouldn't even have happened. And for me, being based in the Netherlands, I've also been exposed to a far larger community of mainly the United Kingdom. So a lot more opportunities to speak at places. Like Nicolas spoke at B-Sides Islamabad, which he probably would not have had the opportunity to do if it wasn't virtual. So I think that in terms of being able to even give a talk, being virtual helped a lot. And for me personally, I found it quite easy. I think I would have felt a lot more nervous in front of a room full of people. But I do also think that this did give me the confidence to go out and do it again in a room full of people.
It's a good answer. Ayush?
Yeah, it does help that I was not looking at faces and them staring back at me, and whether they were clueless about what I was speaking about and other things. But yeah, I mean, I definitely help. In the future, I guess it would be the next step to like talk to a room full of people actually. But this would like be a smaller jump that I'll have to take now, because now I've spoken up, I've created the content, I've known how to prepare for it. It's just that it'll be a different kind of, I'd say, pressure, I guess, when I have to like walk into a room full of people and not be nervous about them not responding the way I had imagined them responding to my content and whatever. So yeah, it definitely helped, and the geographical limitations do go away. That's for sure. I mean, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have been speaking at any conferences if it was not virtual this year. So yeah.
Elizabeth?
I'm going to second what Leonard and I said. I think that the fact that it's virtual and you don't have to travel it saves you time, and it makes you do it, because I don't know if it would not be virtual, whether I would be able to squeeze in time and travel to it, whatever it would be hosted. But on the other hand, I feel that I would be able to sort of network with the other panelists better if it was in real life and I was able to see everyone in person and chat with them before the conference. Backstage, everyone's scared, and there's the stage fright and everything. And you didn't really have that with an online conference. I mean, obviously, before the conference started, we spoken with the people that were hosting it, but we didn't really have a chance to speak with the other panelists and bond that way. So I think that's the only downside, the lack of human interaction. But otherwise, I think time management wise and stage fright wise, when you don't have to speak to, like, how many tickets was it? 300. That number was seriously scary. And when I heard it, I was like, oh my God, imagine 300 people in one room. That would be terrifying. So not seeing those faces in a way was good.
And finally, Nicholas, but just a quick comment from the audience that when you're talking at a virtual conference, you don't have to picture the audience in their underwear, because most of them probably are. So, Nicholas, your answer to the question with that image in your head now.
Yes. Yes, virtual conferences are just a great boon. I mean, yeah, you don't have stage fright, like Elizabeth said. And yes, it gives you so many opportunities. BeerCon being virtual meant that I, from my remote area on the Swiss-French border, could just zoom in. And well, actually, I was at the university, so I was in Switzerland. But I could just zoom in and do my thing, see everyone. Even with the time difference, it wasn't too much of an issue. But I didn't have airplane bills. I didn't have hotel bills. I didn't have that kind of stuff, which as a student is a huge issue. Not gonna lie. And the second part, which I mean, secondly, also it allows you to extend your reach in terms of which conferences you speak to. Like, okay, I'm just gonna beat a dead horse, but besides Islamabad, it's Pakistan. There's a what was it, 5 to 7 hour difference? I'm not quite sure. 5 hour difference between myself and Pakistan. I gave it a 10:25 in the morning. It was 2:25 in the afternoon over there. So my math might be slightly off, 4 hours difference. And it didn't pose any issue. It just quite linear, and it helps because you're just there. You join in. Okay, you don't have the entire like Elizabeth said, meeting each other, talking to each other, sharing a beer, whatever. We'll do that later sometime in the future, like BeerCon 3 or 5 or 6. And we there's this entire ecosystem that is built, that is possible during virtual things. Like, people are preparing their talks and they can communicate to each other and have an ease of access because they're using messaging platforms. It's just fantastic in my opinion. So yeah, big plus.
I'm going to make just a couple of remarks about that. One is, you can tell that Nicholas is in academia because he believes that speakers might have to pay for their own plane tickets. If you work in industry and are being invited to speak to a conference and they are not paying for at least a couple of days in the hotel and your tickets, don't do it. They should be covering your expenses. Academia is a whole other world that I'm not going to touch because I have problems with it. But ultimately, in industry, if they expect you to pay to speak, something's gone very wrong. Anyway, moving on from that. So each of you obviously chose a particular topic for one reason or another. To what extent did you have a passion for that topic, and will you be continuing that in the future? Will you be talking about the same thing in the future? Will you be trying to spread that message, or are you looking to spread a different message, get some practice, find out what your message is? What are you looking to do, and how much did you feel about the topic you presented? And let's start with Nicholas.
Well, a trick question, because I've already spoken again about the exact same subject. I had 10 more minutes, so instead of 47 slides, I did 59. Um, inside joke. Actually, not that much of an inside joke, but never mind. DevSec, well, development is something I do almost every day, even on weekends, even on holidays, mostly because I'm bored. And IoT is something I got roped into by a project I'm doing as an internship for my university studies. There we go. Where I have to deal with IoT, and it's this entire mobile IoT infrastructure, which I'm subtexting basically, where they're using IoT devices with location sensors, detecting atmospheric values and all that, and just piping it to the phone. It pipes it to the ecosystem as a big whatever. So it's something I work in, and it's something that I've been confronted to, something I wanted to talk about, and so I did. And it's something I can talk about and furnish quite extensively. I could do a 200 slide talk about it, except I'm probably not allowed to without breaking my own voice. So it's something that's dear to me that many people don't do. Many development companies, like the big ones, the ones development farms. The number of security flaws that are basic that you can find in there because they're using some code or stack that doesn't have SonarQube, which detects and fixes half their errors, or some other product that does code verification and validation, brings it to a moment where it's necessary to speak about it. And that's what I did. And that's what I'm going to continue to do. Advocacy. Yay.
And I think next, purely because of a comment from the audience about Scottish accents, Elizabeth, apparently you have a better Scottish accent than our local Scot in the audience, local
That's
being
Mike.
a generous term.
Probably Mike has a better Polish accent than I do.
Your answer's the question, please.
If there is a need, if the audience would like more talks about the graduate apprenticeship, I'm more than happy to be an advocate and sell it to everyone. I really enjoy it. And I think that if it wasn't for this program, I wouldn't be able to make the transition, just because if you have a family, if you have financial obligations and you're at a certain age, giving up your employment to go and study full time is just literally impossible. I mean, unless you're filthy rich and you don't have to earn the money to pay the bills. But for me, it was a game changer, and I'm really happy to do the program. I'm hopeful that I'll finish it with success. Keep your fingers crossed for me. But if there's a need, if people would like to hear more about how am I doing and how is the program progressing for me, I'm more than happy to do more talks.
Thank you. And let's go to Lynette next.
I really like responsible disclosure. I like doing it. I think it's important that it's done and to keep the internet safe. So I reckon I will be going on to do that, and automatically flows from that I will continue to speak about it. I'm not sure if I would focus as much on the ethics, but definitely things adjacent to responsible disclosure would be topics for future talks for me. So yeah, I do think I will speak about it again in the future.
And Ayush?
So mine, I guess, was a little niche as far as topics go. So maybe not the exact same thing, but I would definitely want to switch it up this time and maybe do a hands-on workshop along the lines of actually doing what I talked about as a theoretical concept and process. So yeah, that.
I think we've got time for about one more question. So I'm now going to ask each of you. It's only been a week or so since BeerCon2. Actually, there is another question coming in. We might get to that one. We might not. We might get to that one in the private session afterwards. That's only for those who've picked up a ticket. By the way, pick up a ticket so you can join us in the Zoom chat room at some point. But the question I wanted to ask is, it's been a week or so since BeerCon2. has anything actually changed as a result of your talk? Have you had new conversations coming off the back of it? You may or may not have done. It has only been a week. I'm just curious if anyone's noticed a change or started using their talk to say, this message is important, I want to get it out there. Let's go with Ayush first.
The biggest change I guess, would be to like the increase in my Twitter followers. I wasn't really that active on Twitter, but yeah, I mean, a little while before the conference happened, yeah, I started tweeting and then got, I mean, I got a bunch of new followers. That was really cool. As far as talks go, I mean, I don't see people using my talk right now, but yeah, I mean, at some point they might. So yeah.
Nicholas.
So yeah, in the ego self-feeding category, I do sometimes auto-reference myself. I guess it's also a curse of academia. You have to reference everything, so why not reference yourself? Uh, what I did do is I did start a blog about my experiences in InfoSec and everything, which I also added the Global Search Party CTF, and I'm going to add besides Islamabad to it. Because it's a way to communicate. For the moment, the link is not yet live, but you'll be able to find it at atomicnicos.me. Self-plug, shamelessly. And honestly, I find it hasn't necessarily changed my interactions as of themselves, but it has changed how certain people in my academic circles not necessarily think of me, but how they communicate, at what level they communicate. For example, an IT support engineer from our university, one of the sysadmins, so he does both, just sent me an email to my InfoSec email address, saying, oh yeah, I saw your blog, fantastic, and he saw my video, and I was like, oh fuck. And so it's already started to bleed out, and I fear that it's going to have some repercussions, including me speaking at a security and cryptography class next year, next semester at university, for at least 2 hours. That's gonna be fun. I'll have 200 slides.
But are they arranged in a sort of cryptographic order so that no one can puzzle them out except you? Anyway, Lynette.
Not much has really changed, I think. I did have a few conversations with people that already knew about my talk, about mostly, hey, cool that you spoke. I don't agree with you, but that's what friends are for, I suppose. But it sparked some interesting discussion, but nothing really outstanding or special beyond that.
Yeah, you do have to allow people to be wrong. I mean, disagree. Elizabeth.
For me, I think a lot have changed in a way that I became more confident. There was a huge positive response to my talk, and that was very reassuring and motivating. But also, I think over half of my company, apologize for my dog, he always does that when I talk. I think over half of my company tuned in or listened to the recording of my talk, which was very encouraging as well to see that, you know, people are interested in my journey. And I've joined Quorum Cyber when the pandemic was already in and the lockdown started. So I haven't really met most of my teammates and seeing them being interested in my journey and, you know, messaging me about the talk and how they like the presentation was very reassuring and team building, at least for me. So yeah, a lot of change for me.
Right, I'm going to do one final question before we take this all to the general private chatter blather thing, which goes back to something that you said, Elizabeth, about access and mentioning family commitments and so on, and also goes back to the talk about virtual conferences, helping people feel more comfortable presenting. So does this actually help with the classic disadvantaged privileged groups discussions that we might have in security? And we know, let's not have any debate about it, we know there's a huge issue in security about access and accessibility and diversity. Does this sort of event, do virtual events, not saying BeerCon2 rookies only, but do virtual events help with that sort of thing? If we start with yourself, Elizabeth, and then we'll go from there. This is opinion only. I'm not expecting anyone to back it up with data or facts or prove their point or anything else. I'm purely interested in your opinion.
In my case, it really does help. I have 2 small kids, and organizing childcare is sometimes impossible. Like, we don't have any grandparents living around. So doing a virtual conference where, like today, the kids are somewhere in the background, they come in and I can mute my microphone, and I hope that no one noticed. It's really good. And I also think that because of that, normally it would be a disadvantage for me. I wouldn't be able to travel to a conference that would be in a different country or, you know, at the other end of the UK, just because of the childcare arrangements, for example. So having an option to do it virtually is inclusive for me. I'm able to organize my life around it and, you know, make an impression that I'm handling everything and juggling all the balls.
Leonard?
Yeah, I completely agree with the travel side of things. For me, I don't have kids, so traveling is quite a bit easier. But at the same time, you wouldn't fly to the United Kingdom twice a month or something, most likely. Whereas with virtual conferences, I've seen so many, not even spoke at, but just attended different things during lockdown, like from all over the world. So I definitely think that virtual conferences help with accessibility and exposure to new environments and new people.
And Nicholas?
I completely agree with the 2 previous points. I just want to build up on it. I have certain academic responsibilities and other stuff going on. So yeah, traveling somewhere would have been an issue for me as well. I do want to add that conferences doing something virtual is fantastic, but there's always this type of cycle in conferences where they'll try to get names, not necessarily good names, bad names. I'm not even going to say names, just names. They're going to try to get names because it boosts their visibility. And so rookies or people that would benefit from not having to go somewhere because they have other responsibilities get surpassed by all these names that do this for a living half the time, or they can quite easily say, oh yeah, you know, screw it, I'm going for a week, I'm going to, I don't know, who knows where, I don't know, Germany, let's say Germany, going to DEF CON in Germany, speaking at DEF CON Hamburg, or if that exists, and they can take that liberty. Whereas people like myself or other students or people with families like Elizabeth can't necessarily take that thing and wouldn't even consider submitting CFP because they have all these responsibilities. So it just gets into a cycle of names. And so that's one of the main issues I have with conferences, and one of the boons of having it all go virtual. Also pandemic, so you know you wouldn't want to move anywhere all the time anyways. So
Thank you. And Ayush?
Yeah, it definitely helps that like virtual conferences in terms of accessibility, because I mean I attended a few conferences as like an attendee, and even that took a lot of work to planning and travel arrangements and everything. So definitely, if you throw in speaking and doing a session or a talk in that, so it's a lot of work, and then you have a lot of things on your head. Whereas in like virtual conferences, all you can focus on and have to focus on is just your talk, and you have your like day. You can plan out stuff way in advance and everything. without having to worry about pretty much anything else. So yeah, that definitely helps. Even I guess improves the quality of what you would be able to present. I mean, at least during the starts if you're not a pro. So I mean, yeah, it definitely helps with accessibility and like maybe even improves the quality of one's talks if they're just starting out.
Okay, right. I'm going to do a quick thing to wrap it all up, and then I'll take us off the live streaming. So you'll only have to deal with the attendees, so you don't need to watch what you're saying quite as much. I actually completely agree with all of that, and I've been on and probably still theoretically on the conference circuit as much as it exists. But honestly, BeerCon2, there was so much more variety in terms of topics, in terms of the voices there, and yet the quality was so much higher than I have seen at the majority of commercial conferences where they will pay my expenses. I'm not good enough that they'll pay me, but they will pay my expenses to go out there. I do think there is a huge accessibility thing. I do think I'm just going to give a quick clap to the beer farmers there, because I think you've nailed something with that. So we're all waiting for BeerCon3. They aren't paying me for this endorsement, by the way, but if you're watching, go and watch BeerCon2. Look at how rookies, at how you can actually do that sort of conversation, that sort of presentation, particularly when you've got these opportunities to do it virtually. And with that, I'm going to say goodbye to everyone on live streaming, particularly those who are probably going to send me hate mail shortly because I've just interrupted their free first class tickets. But anyway, I'm stopping live streaming now.